What is up, everybody? Cody Shirk here. I am sacrificing the bottoms of my feet. It is hotter than Hades out here in South Florida, but we got a cool storm behind us, and I'm going to talk to you today about Venezuela. This is breaking news, so if you're listening to this a couple weeks later, this may be a little bit older news, but what I'm about to tell you is still really relevant. This will be relevant for quite some time. This video is going to be a mixture of investing. I've got some specific investing opportunities, some geopolitics stuff going on, and maybe some nature. I saw a manatee again back there, and yesterday I saw baby turtles walking down the beach, so maybe we'll find some of those. All right, let's jump into it. Venezuela just had their election yesterday on a Sunday, and it's making international news right now that the results of that election are a sham. And who knows what's going to happen over the coming weeks, but as we stand right now, Maduro, who has been the leader since 2011, is saying that he won another 6-year term re-election. Now, I don't want to get into if that's actually true or not, because I'm sure you can make your own judgments, but I need to tell you about the implications of what's going on here, the investing opportunities, what I think is going to happen geopolitically, and also the very near-term fallout that this may create. So I can't dive into any of this without explaining the background of Venezuela and why it's an important country internationally. And by the way, I'm doing this no notes, just kind of freestyling it, so please bear with me on the sequence of events that I share here. Venezuela has the #1 oil reserves in the world, so they should be a very, very rich country. And they were up until the late 90s. And what happened in 99 is Chavez took over leadership of the country and turned the country into a socialist communist nation, which basically means taking the money from the country and redistributing the wealth to people all around. Now, this worked for a couple of years. Just like every communist and socialist story around the world, it actually works for a couple of years. But guess what happens later on? When people get stuff for free, they are not incentivized to work hard. And after a little while, your society will fall. This has happened so many times throughout history, it's almost crazy that people still think this system will work. Anyway, Chavez came into power in 99. He passed away in 2013 and passed his leadership on to the person he mentored, given some air quotes there, to Maduro, Nicolas Maduro, who is currently, well, we're in a gray area today, but has been the president of Venezuela since 2013. And I say president very loosely because it's very unlikely that he is really the elected leader, meaning the people don't really want him in leadership. Maduro has been in power for 11 years, and getting reelected yesterday, via his own words, his party's statements, will put him in power for another 6 years. So he'll be in power for a total of 17 years if he actually stays there for the 6 years he says he just got elected for. Okay, so a little bit more about Venezuela as a country. Like I said, they have an enormous amount of oil reserves, but they also have gold, they have diamonds, they have rare earth metals. They have pretty much every natural resource you can think of. So as a nation, as a country, they are extremely wealthy. Again, the mismanagement, corruption, and general stealing that has been going on by politicians in that country is obscene, and the Venezuelan people have taken it in the teeth. They are getting beat up, and since 2014, their GDP has sank 80%. To give you some context on what that means, in the US, when we had the Great Depression a century ago, 80% GDP drop is double the US depression. So to put that into context for you, we're talking major evaporation of wealth, quality of life, and general unhappiness amongst the Venezuelan people, which is why a quarter of their population, 8 million people, have left since 2014. All right, so that's the general gist of the Venezuela as a country. Now, this morning, I spoke to several of my on-the-ground contacts in Colombia, in Guyana, and one in Venezuela. And if you don't know, I have been an investor in the region for quite some time. I own real estate in Colombia. I'm very aware of the impacts that Venezuela has caused on its neighboring countries. And I also keep close touch with people who understand what's going on the ground. So the people I spoke with this morning have generally the same message with some tweaks here and there. So let me go over those. In Guyana, last year, Maduro held an election that said, hey, we want to take back our land, which is 2/3 of Guyana, called the Essequibo region. And of course, the vote went over successfully. 90% of the people in Venezuela said, yeah, let's take over 2/3 of Guyana. That's a whole different story, but the point is that Guyana and Venezuela are definitely got some conflicts going on right now. And the fallout that's happening right now as I speak is, I don't want to say entertaining for the Guyanese, but it's certainly a point that the Guyanese can point to and say, look, this country wanted to take over some of our land. Now look, they can't even hold an election properly. So who are they to say that they own 2/3 of Guyana? So my Guyanese contacts, they're not super concerned. And for context, the Essequibo region of Guyana is 2/3 of the country and it's pure jungle. So the fact that Venezuela said we're going to take this over is logistically almost impossible unless you want to invade the jungle where anacondas are going to take you out. Other side of Venezuela is Colombia. In 2018, Maduro got reelected, and the next year, Venezuela had a major crisis where hundreds of thousands of people left Venezuela because there was no food. There was nothing. I'm sure many of you remember there was a toilet paper shortage in that country. And so people left because the quality of life there was miserable, and they were starving. So hundreds of thousands of people left Venezuela within a matter of weeks, and many of them went into Colombia. This created a crisis for Colombia in the major cities there, and many Venezuelans still live in Colombia. So this morning I spoke with my contact there, and he said yesterday, Sunday, during the election of Venezuela in Colombia, there was major demonstrations in all the cities of Colombia. We're talking 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people assembling in the major cities. Each city, for example, in Cali, Colombia, there was over 40,000 people there that assembled, Venezuelans and Colombians, supporting the election to get Maduro out. Now, the pre-polls were showing that Maduro's opposition was going to win by a margin of 80%. We're talking full landslide here. And the exit polls were showing that Maduro was going to lose, again, by about 70%. So the point is that this wasn't even in a contest. However, Maduro, of course, is saying he's going to win because, guess what? He controls everything. He controls the military. He controls the tax collectors. He controls the NEC, which is the National Election Council. So guess what? When you control things, you can have the outcome that you want. And that's exactly what Maduro is making happen as I speak. So in Colombia, the general take is that, holy smokes, Maduro is still holding on, and whatever has happened in the past several years is going to continue, if not get worse. Again, my contact in Colombia, I asked him, hey, what do you think is going to happen? Is this going to get worse? Is there going to be a civil war there? And he said, well, I don't know about a civil war, but there will certainly be more and more Venezuelans leaving the country for a better life, voting with their feet, escaping places that don't treat them well. So, okay, fast forward to investing opportunities. That's what I said I was going to talk about in the beginning. It's worth noting that, again, Venezuela is a very wealthy nation from a resource perspective. They have lots of oil, they have lots of minerals, they have rare earth metals, they have an enormous amount of water that produces hydroelectricity. They have a relatively sophisticated culture because prior to the 90s, they were one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and they had very high education rates. And so the country's got a lot going for itself other than the past couple of decades. So the country does have a stock exchange. It's called the BVC, Bolsa de Valores de Caracas, which is essentially the Caracas Stock Exchange, which is the capital of the nation. Those stocks in that country have actually crushed it the past couple of years. And that's because last year the US lifted sanctions off of Venezuela as kind of an olive branch to Maduro, saying, hey, Maduro, we're going to lift sanctions off of you if you hold free and fair elections. This was a Biden era, let's say, negotiation tactic. And what did Maduro do right after that was done? Well, he almost immediately stated that he was going to take over 2/3 of Guyana, like I've previously mentioned. And he did nothing to indicate he was going to proceed with free and fair elections and do what the Americans and much of the Western world wanted him to do. So that olive branch that the US extended was more or less a disaster geopolitically, but investing-wise, it was a huge success. There are many, many hedge funds around the world who are investing or have invested in Venezuelan debt. And to give you a perspective on what that is, there is debt on the real estate, the infrastructure, and actual companies within Venezuela that are trading for pennies on the dollar. And the reason why it's trading for pennies on the dollar is because the original investors who invested, say, a couple of decades ago or a decade ago, they can't get their money out. They can't get their money out, so they've been willing to sell off the assets or the debt on much of those assets within Venezuela for pennies on the dollar. They threw their hands up in the air and said, screw this, I'm walking away from this investment. I'll sell it off to another investor who can pick up these investments for pennies on the dollar. So those investors, many of them were hedge funds. And by the way, if you are a private investor, somebody who likes to write big checks, I will be providing a list of all these hedge funds probably next week or so. There's too many to list in this video right now. It'll be through my newsletter. I'm just gonna send it out. Nothing, no catch, it's totally free. I'll send a list out just because it's interesting to see which countries and which groups are participating in this game. But those hedge funds have crushed it. We're talking 300, 400, 500% gains in the past year. And the Caracas stock market, there are about 40 listed companies on that stock exchange. Of those 40 companies, you got about a dozen who are financially oriented. We're talking banks and other financial institutions. You have some industrial companies, and then you have some state-owned companies. I wouldn't touch the state-owned companies that are traded on a public exchange in Venezuela for obvious reasons. But the financial ones are very interesting. There are a couple bank stocks that have gone up like 400 or 500% in the past years or two. And if you want exposure to Venezuelan investing opportunities directly in Venezuela, you're gonna have to find a way to buy those stocks. Again, you can go search. This is totally public information. There's no hidden, trick here. You just got to go check it out for yourself. You can literally search in these companies that are trading on an exchange, and I think they're still really cheap, like really, really cheap. And the possibility for them to go up way more is certainly possible. Now, going back to the debt part, which is what these hedge funds have been buying up. They have crushed it in the past couple of years because there's an expectation that the environment within Venezuela is going to get better because the US lifted sanctions, but also people were expecting Maduro to leave. They thought he was not going to get reelected, but of course he controls everything in the country, so it's really no surprise that he's hanging on for power. I don't know what's going to happen in the near future. He may hold on to power. He may use all of his power internally in the country to hold on to everything he has. It's worth noting that he does have some international support. Over the past year, this has not made the media at all, but over the past year, they have been tracking flights from Russia into Venezuela. These flights have been military flights. I have no idea what they're delivering. You can let your mind wander there. May have been military equipment, may have been money, may have been gold, may have been people, may have been, who knows, maybe transporting politicians and insiders back and forth. But the point is that Venezuela still has very strong connections to Cuba, Iran, Russia, and likely North Korea and other countries who are on the US blacklist but can produce some very devastating weapons. So it's very possible that these countries have been importing military assets into Venezuela for preparation for this election and whatever is going to be the fallout there. All right, if you want to find out who these hedge funds are, go to my website, because I can't list them here. There's so many of them, and honestly, I got to go through all of them to type them all out so you can read everything. What's going to happen in the coming days? The short-term effects of Venezuela. That's what probably most people are interested in, and I think a lot of the world is holding their breath. Again, if this was a country that didn't have any resources, let's say they didn't have any oil, didn't have any metals, didn't have a large population, weren't geographically strategic, etc., nobody would care what's going on here. There's many countries who have sham elections, and for the most part, the world just turns a blind eye. But guess what? People care about Venezuela because they have so much oil, they have so much wealth, and they're very strategically located. So Anthony Blinken, the defense secretary in the US, made a statement last night that they're not happy. They are saying, Maduro, we know this wasn't a real election. We are displeased with what is going on in your country. You need to make things right or else. Dun, dun, dun. Who knows what that means? There's some memes going around on Twitter, X right now, of the Green Berets and special ops in the US licking their chops, thinking, hey, they're gonna get sent in to overthrow the Venezuelan government. I don't know if that's really gonna happen, because as Maduro may seem weak from the outside, he does have a pretty strong defense base internally, because he makes everybody rich who's at the top with him, the oligarchs of Venezuela. So, and also the US is spread so thin right now. We're gonna start something new. We're gonna go now into Venezuela. And as a side note, people who are looking at geopolitics over the past several years and seeing everything blow up, that's what happens when you have a weak leader in the leading nation. Other countries start to take advantage, and that's the situation we're in right now in the world. And for the US, we are getting spread way too thin. Venezuela, though, may be I don't want to say top of the list, but maybe top 5 priority for the US to go in and make something happen. Obviously, this would not be like an invasion or anything, or even anything publicly. This would be some backdoor, use this person to use that person to get Maduro to step out of power. However, he is definitely a proxy. I'm saying Maduro is definitely a proxy for nations who are further away from the US, meaning nations such as Russia or other countries may be supporting Maduro in order to give the US a hard time. And of course, it's strategic for Russia, Iran, and these other countries to support Venezuela, to give US a hard time, but also to get the resources that are in Venezuela out to those countries. And I'm sure they're getting some great deals on those resources. So in the coming weeks, what's gonna happen? European nations are currently, as I speak, they are releasing statements that they are displeased, that they don't think the elections within Venezuela are free and fair. They are fighting for the Venezuelan people. And I would not be surprised at all in the coming days and weeks that we see some major announcements from either NATO, the US, or even neighboring Latin American countries to express their concerns with what's going on in Venezuela. Again, I don't think there's going to be many threats, just because the only person, or not person, but country or group that's capable of going in there is probably, again, NATO, US, and we are spread so thin right now, it would be unwise to, be picking a new conflict to dive into. Although I will say it does certainly relate to the larger conflicts in the world. You can't see it right now. There's a dude over here. There's my finger. And there's a manatee sticking his nose up right over here. It's beautiful out here, and we got some crazy storms that are probably coming to shore soon. I will follow up on this Venezuelan topic. Again, I am personally invested in most of the countries that surround Venezuela, so I'm clearly going to be keeping tabs of what's going on, but I'm also talking to people on the ground who are letting me know what's going on in real time. That said, there's always going to be different stories, and I'm trying to blend all the intel together to give a general consensus of what the feeling is on the ground and what the outlook or outcome is likely to be in the coming weeks. So stick with me over the coming weeks. I'll try and make some more content that you can check out to get an idea of what is going on in Venezuela. And this will impact the global economy. I want to make that clear. They have the most oil in the world. If they do somehow miraculously start to drill more oil, they're not going to, because they're just so corrupt there. But if another country wants to start really drilling that oil out of Venezuela, they could certainly disrupt the flow of oil commerce around the world, which would play havoc with the US dollar, which would play havoc with a lot of things. So that's why it's geopolitically important to keep track of what's going on here. All right, guys, go out, explore the world, have a nice day, and enjoy nature. Look how beautiful it is behind me. Sorry I didn't find any turtles. Maybe next time. All right, see you guys. Bye.